Hello everybody, and welcome back to another market analysis for the month of June. Now today I have a lot I want to talk about, but chiefly I want to have a look at the aftermath of the Sins of the Father update, as it was a major content update and there were new items released with it. Now somewhat surprisingly, the price of these items have stayed pretty constant. They have not crashed nearly as much as most people thought, and we're going to get into why in a second here. So we're going to be looking at the new items, we're going to be looking at any items that have been affected by the update, as well as I'm going to have a look at anything else interesting in the RuneScape market this month. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and let's get started. Okay, so first up here, let's have a look at the two new items that were released with the Sins of the Father, because these two items are doing some interesting things, mainly the Blood Shard. Now the price that the Blood Shard is at currently is very surprising. It's actually worth 8 mil right now, which is pretty close to what the price was on the release day, and has actually been increasing over the last week pretty much. So after the first 8 to 10 hours, the Blood Shard dropped down to about 5 mil each, and that's actually where it bottomed out. Most people thought it would continue down to under a mil, including myself, but it didn't. It actually continues to rise up, and today it's worth 8 mil. Now the reason that's so surprising is because the item itself is quite bad. Most people seem to agree that it's almost useless. For example, somebody posted on Reddit that doing a full Nightmare of Ashihama kill with the new Blood Fury amulet didn't even heal more than a single Saradomin brew over a 20-minute kill, so it's not very strong. So why is it actually going up in price? Well, there is a pretty strong expectation that it's going to be buffed. Because the item is actually so god-awful terrible, most people think that the item is going to get buffed, and that is even being somewhat confirmed by Mod Ash on Twitter, saying that they quite possibly will be buffing it and they prefer to see things launch conservatively with scope for buffs in the future. He even goes as far to say that I've seen it confirmed that the devs who made it are considering a buff, and I personally believe without that reassurance from Mod Ash, the item probably wouldn't be as expensive as it is today. I am sure a lot more people are holding on the Blood Shards because of that comment than would be elsewise, even though the item is so terrible. So what is my prediction? Well, I do think there will most likely eventually be a buff, but unless the buff is something extraordinary, I think the price is going to crash down right after that. There's no way in hell that the Blood Shard is worth 8 mil, and unless it becomes extremely powerful for some reason, I think it's going to crash down still to 1 to 3 mil or even less. Now on the flip side here, the Ring of Endurance is actually really good, and I don't think a lot of people were paying as much attention to the ring. And because of that, it's actually retained a really high value. Now, for some reason, it's not being tracked that well on GE Tracker, but I personally have actually flipped it quite a lot. So we can go have a look at the prices that I bought and sold it over the last couple of weeks and see how it's actually changed in price. Just in case you were wondering, RuneLite does actually track all of your transactions, and you can look at them afterwards. Okay, so here are all the transactions I have done for the Ring of Endurance over the last week or so. The first transaction we did was about at 30 mil, then they went up a bit to 35 mil, up to 35 mil up here too, and then 3 days ago overnight they jump up from 35 mil-ish each all the way up to 50 mil pretty much, and they've held pretty strong at that price point over the last 3 days really. So it's kind of interesting that the Ring of Endurance actually followed a similar trend to the Blood Shard, even though the Ring of Endurance is objectively way better. Now to account for that fairly significant change in price, I would assume that has to do with the Hallowed Sepulchre getting nerfed. Sure, it was a fairly minor nerf, but I think it was enough to dissuade a number of people from doing it, which had a pretty significant effect of increasing it in price by almost 30-40%. Now as these items are fairly new, they're going to eventually lose value, but I'm very impressed so far with how much they've actually held their value, especially the Blood Shard. Okay, so now let's have a look at some items that have been affected by the new update, but aren't necessarily new items. Okay, the Amulet of Fury is something that kind of surprised me a bit. It actually crashed significantly. In the last market update video, or maybe my investment video, I mentioned that I thought a good portion of its recent increase had to do with more so Zalcano being nerfed. I think I might have been wrong about that one because the Amulet of Fury crashed very quickly and significantly after the new update. Once people kind of realized that the Blood Shard was pretty terrible, most people ended up dumping their Amulet of Fury investment. Well, let's have a look here. Now before the update day, the Amulet of Fury was actually up to a bit over 3 mil, which is at, I think, a yearly high almost. After the new update was released, it pretty much immediately dropped 500k. This is kind of where I thought it would stabilize, but no, it continues to go down after that. Unfortunately, it seems like Amulet of Furies are just kind of destined to be cheap now. Let's have a look at the quarter here. Back in March, I think is when the Zalcano nerfs came through. The item started to increase in price fairly significantly, peaked again for Sins of the Father, and now has completely crashed. Okay, another interesting item here is the Vampire Dust. This one kind of came out of nowhere. Nobody knew that Vampire Dust was going to be useful. Or did they? You know what? I actually kind of take that back. It looks like Vampire Dust went up before the update. Interesting. I wonder if people just guessed because it had the word vampire in it. Well, regardless, as this item is used in the Hallowed Sepulchre, it peaked during the release day at 2,000, 3,000 each, and is actually still holding a pretty strong price at over 1,000 each. I really like the idea of revitalizing old items in new updates, because now this is probably going to be consistently worth 1,000 each because it's constantly being used during the Sepulchre, which is kind of fun to give this item a use. Killing vampires now is at least moderately profitable. I think it's just a good use of a new update. We have the stamina potions. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I already made a full video on my investment. But the hype surrounding stamina potions turned out to be much more influential than the content itself, and they pretty much immediately dropped down to 6,000 and have actually crashed down to 5,900, which is pretty much the price they were back in December. And another item following a similar trend there is the Summer Pie. A lot of people thought it would be useful in the Sepulchre. Turns out it's not useful really at all. At its peak, it was worth around 1,800 and then immediately got cut in half. Now obviously there were other items affected less directly, but those are the main ones I could think of. And it just shows you how impactful updates can be on the price of existing items. Now over the last couple of months, I have been tracking a few items fairly closely, and those are items that were affected by the early game restrictions put in place a couple of months ago. Now it seems that they are finally starting to crash back down in price, and I'm kind of interested to have a look why. For example, iron ore this week has started crashing very quickly, going from 176 down to 112. It had been holding a pretty constant price above 150 over the last month or two. Let's look back at the quarter here. Now all the way back from March, when they put the restrictions in, the price had been increasing from 50 GP, peaking at around 200 or 180, something like that. And it wasn't until this week that the items started to crash. So we're seeing a pretty similar trend with other similar items like oak logs, for example, are finally crashing 140 down to 108. So those are going down really quickly. Same thing with regular logs as well. Now, if I were to make a guess, I would say that has to do with Twitch Prime. Even though there are early game restrictions, if you throw enough bots at it, I think eventually the item is still going to decrease in price. Generally, restrictions like that, where they put in total playtime requirements, quest point requirements, stuff like that, eventually bots will get around them. It's going to constantly be slowing them down, so overall it's still a good thing, and obviously stuff like Twitch Prime really does not help the matter. One other explanation is the items just kind of hit a critical point where, well, iron ore, oak logs, even regular logs, these could be the just best moneymakers in free to play. Oak logs being worth 150 each actually makes it probably, one of the best moneymakers. So legitimate players and bots alike are just going to be using that method, and that has just started to tank the price. Oak logs specifically have had a bit of a wild ride this month. I don't really know what happened with the release of Darkmire. I'm not sure why logs went up in price so much. I know you needed planks for the Sepulchre, but they almost doubled in price for the release day of Sins of the Father. Now obviously not everything is going down. A couple things that have actually increased really significant is the high-end Nightmare items. Look at just the Inquisitor's Maze over the last month. It's gone from 475 mil all the way up to 715 mil, which is like a 30-40% increase, which is really significant. Probably the item that has had the most increase this month. Now, to be honest, I'm not actually sure why the item is increasing in price so much. Being the best in slot item for Crush, I mean, it's gonna be useful places. The Nightmare itself is one of the main uses. It is possible that more people are buying it to do the Nightmare. It does seem like most of the Nightmare items are getting a bit of a rebound this month. The Harmonized Orb has gone up about 200 mil this month. Even the Inquisitor's armor set seems to be increasing in price as well. So what do you guys think? Do you think it's a natural rebound after a pretty swift item crash? Do you think the Nightmare items have more uses than originally were thought? Let me know what you think with a comment down below. I'd be interested to hear your opinion. And finally here, I always like to have a look at the old school RuneScape bond, which this month specifically, it looks like we're back on the increase again. Pretty much ever since people have been stuck at home, playing lots of RuneScape, bonds have been crashing in price, as it did kind of look like a lot more players were buying bonds to get more GP, spending their stimulus check, whatever. So bonds really started to decrease in price. Now it looks like they're going back up again. So that could be a sign that things are returning more to normal. People are going back to work, or at least that is the expectation or impression of people. Whether or not that's true, who knows? So most likely, as people get back to their real lives, maybe the player counts in RuneScape drop a bit, I would imagine bonds are going to start rocketing back up, probably close to 5 mil again pretty soon after. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for the market analysis this month. I've actually been doing closer to 2 a month over the last couple of weeks. I like doing them. It seems like people enjoy them a lot, and usually enough changes in even 2 weeks to make a video on it. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.